Support for the Capital Connection comes from New York State United Teachers, working to support students, educators, and public schools as the center of their communities through the Public Schools Unite Us initiative. It's the Capital Connection, and I'm David Gastina, joined this week by New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, a Democrat. Welcome back, and before we even begin, let me say I hope you will have a happy holiday season.
Thank you, David. I wish the same for you and your family and your listeners. It's been quite a year already. It's not done yet. I'm hoping for not just happy holidays, but quiet ones. And Christmas, particularly for my family, is always a time for people to reconnect. And I know you and I were talking offline. You're going to do that as well. And coming off of the late in November Thanksgiving, it'll be nice to very soon have those same reconnections. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, let's be thankful for our families and take the time to let others know how we feel.
You look at what's going on in the world, and with all of our struggles and divisions, and there are many in this country, thank God we're in the United States of America. I mean, it's a tough time globally, and we should just cherish what we have here.
No question. Well, let's talk about what we have here, because as the state comptroller, obviously, finances is mixed up in everything when it comes to New York State government and politics. But there's another issue, and I want to address it off the top here. And you made a statement about it. It has to do with the governor, Governor Hochul, and she vetoed the transparency legislation. Now, this is a big one for you. The bill would have required agencies to publish the details of state contracts when it's exempt from approval by the state comptroller's office. This is the second time Hochul vetoed the bill. Lawmakers are expected to revisit it in 2025. But again, that bill is going to require state agencies to post information not currently available to the public on lucrative contracts awarded to private entities, and the governor vetoed it. Now, you had a fight with the former governor about transparency, and yet it continues.
Yeah, and I guess that's what's troubling to me, because in fairness to Governor Hochul, she has been better on this issue, than the prior administration. The legislature restored much of our contract oversight back. However, and this is the big however, still under this governor and with the current legislature, in some limited circumstances, they have continued to, by statute, usually as part of budget language, write us out of our usual check and balance contract review in some specific areas. And then you have the whole issue of emergency contracts, which we understand, COVID being the most recent significant example. There are certain situations where you do have to declare an emergency, and in the interest of efficiency and speed, have the process short-circuited, if you will. I would still argue, unless it's a real dire emergency, you should never short-circuit it, because we know how to turn things around quickly when you need to. But that being said, at the very least, what our argument has been, if this is going to happen, if you're going to exempt these contracts, which could be of many thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands in some cases, from a controller review, which is what we're set up to do, to look out for taxpayer interest. At the very least, after the fact, post the information. Our original bill that was vetoed last year would require the contract itself to be posted within 30 days. The governor vetoed it, arguing that it was an onerous requirement. Well, I don't agree with that assessment, but in an effort to try to make it easier, we amended the bill, and I have to give credit to the legislature for unanimously passing it, and Senator Cooney and Assembly Member Solage for continuing to sponsor this. And we amended it to say within 30 days, the agency has to post basically a summary of the contract. Who did the contract go to? What was the amount? A brief description of it. How did the contract relate to an emergency? If, in fact, it was an emergency, was there any competition in soliciting for the contract? Basic information. David, I'll just sum it up in this way. The only way to have accountable government is if you have transparency. And this bill, to me, was not a significant change, but a very important change. And I was very disappointed that, once again, she vetoed it, again suggesting that it's onerous. I don't agree at all. So I'm hoping the legislature will take it up again next year. And I hope the governor will pardon the expression, see the light on this one, because it is about shining a light on government operations.
Well, yeah. And, we have this incredible wave of cynicism, not only in politics and government, but in most of our institutions right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make more sense, especially from the governor of the state, to open up and show what's in these contracts? Will the legislature, do you think, is just dead in the water now, or do you think they'll make a serious revisit on this in 2025?
Well, the sponsors, Senator Cooney and Assemblymember Szilagyi, have been very forthright, saying that it's an issue they're going to continue to champion. So the fact that it passed unanimously, I'm hopeful it'll come up again. Perhaps we'll have further conversation with the second floor and see what their real objections are. But I just think a lot of it's about tone, if I could put it that way. When you have a proposal like this that really is not a monumental change, but sends a strong message about openness, which is what we should be striving for, to keep vetoing it, I just think raises more suspicions. As you say, we're in a very tough time in terms of confidence in government. Not having this information being fully disclosed really just raises questions. And I'm not ascribing any nefarious motivation on this, but to me, it should have been a no-brainer to sign it.
Well, speaking of motivation and tone, let's talk for a minute about the congestion pricing plan. You and I have discussed this in the past. Mm-hmm. The governor had the original plan, which he paused. I think it was for 5 or 6 months. The original plan was going to charge $15 to motorists during peak times of the day below 60th Street, Manhattan. And she paused that before the election, right? Yep. And then the election comes. If you're reading the tea leaves, you say, well, this is a tax. You don't want to have that on New Yorkers' minds before the election. The election comes and goes. Democrats do fairly well in New York. They do well. And then, here comes the congestion pricing plan again, revived. Now it's $9. As the chief financial officer, I know this is New York City and the MTA, but you look at these things as well. What are you making of all this?
Well, look, first of all, the MTA to have a fully funded capital plan is essential to the public transit system, public transportation in the New York City metro area functioning. And that is essential to the economy. And certainly the New York City metro area is essential to the economy of the state of New York. So it is of everyone's interest, even if you're not living in Brooklyn or in Westchester or whatever. What I had said, and I'm sure we talked about it on your show when we talked about this going back a couple of months ago, I had no, from the controller's perspective, no opinion plus or minus on congestion pricing. What I said is that the MTA capital plan must be funded. If you want to have the system in a state of good repair, meaning when you have old subway cars and old trains that are outliving their useful life, they've got to be replaced. When you've got stations that need to be made handicap accessible in compliance with ADA and commitments that have been made, that has to be done and costs a lot of money. When you have to deal with the issue of resilience, building it into the system because of climate change and severe storms, that takes money. All of this takes money. So my position always was, you have to fund the capital plan. If you do not want congestion pricing, and obviously many people have not been in favor of it, you got to come up with the money some other way. And what it came down to is exactly as you said. The governor put a pause on it. There was some question whether that pause was permanent, temporary, would it be congestion pricing light? And as you point out, she did come back with a version of congestion pricing, at least initially, is lower than the $15 original charge. It'll be phased back up to that. There are still lawsuits pending. We'll see what will happen with that. I think the good news in terms of my concern for funding the MTA's capital plan is that the MTA will be able to fulfill its commitments as far as the current 2020-2024 capital plan. However, David, they've unveiled a new capital plan. And now that capital plan for the next cycle, I think the gap of about $33 billion. So the MTA is not out of the woods. In the short run, yes, this money will help with the priority projects that they need to spend money on. I'll channel my old dear friend Dick Ravitch, whose voice I miss tremendously. And he, as you know, was a wonderful champion for the MTA.
Oh, yeah. and
he always said, if you remember, he saved the MTA back in, I guess, the 70s when it was really in bad shape. If you want people to ride the trains and the subways and the buses, you have to have a system in a state of good repair. we are not back to the ridership level that we were pre-pandemic. The MTA needs the fare box revenue most of all for its operating expenses. So the interplay between how you fund the capital plan, how you maintain the system, people using the trains and the subways and the buses and revenue, it's all interconnected. And it's not to say there aren't other issues. There are issues of public safety, of cleanliness, concern for, incidents happening on the subway, mental health, you go down the list. But in terms of what the MTA certainly has a very direct control over, that is the maintenance of the infrastructure, the capital plan is essential. So I still say, David, to your listeners who are saying, no, I don't want congestion pricing, unless we come up with another way to fund the MTA's capital plan, that's the solution that state leadership has decided on.
Well, Liz Kruger's argument, the Democrat from the east side of Manhattan, was you don't have to go below 60th Street. There's plenty of public transportation in the city. You don't have, it's not a requirement that you pay that $9.
Yeah.
You can make another decision.
But in fairness to those who are concerned about it, some people have to go down. They don't have an alternative, or they do worry about getting on a train. And we don't have to recount some of the problems, limited though they may be. They end up on the front page of the papers,
sure.
And that's a real fear. That's a real concern. But as I said, we're not out of the woods, because now we have the next iteration of the capital plan that has a funding gap. So we're still going to have to look at these questions. And I know some people argue back, well, the MTA should just spend their money more wisely. And I think there's always opportunity for efficiency, but the basic capital infrastructure, you need money. You need money to maintain it. You cannot get around that. So I don't think this debate is over, but I think in the short run, unless the courts change it, at least for now, congestion pricing will come in. And I don't know, David, last time you drove in New York City, it's fair to say there's a lot of congestion. The goal here is not just the funding. The goal here, if it's going to work as intended, will be some relief on the congestion. And many people say the jury is still out on whether or not that happens. Even you talk to people who've been to London. I haven't been to London any time recently. Some people say it works very well there. Other people say not so much. So we'll see what the New York experience will be. I know other cities across the nation are looking at it as well.
Yeah, I just try to survive the West Side Highway and then park in the Upper West Side if I can even find a space. Then I'll take the subway.
Right.
Well, here's a question for you, and it's been on my mind now that we have President-elect Trump about to take office in January, because why? We've talked about this before. And now it's getting an added boost because of the president, and that's cryptocurrency. What are you seeing in this area, and what does this mean to you and perhaps New York?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I think there's a lot that we still don't know. I mean, one perspective I'll offer, is as an investor with the state pension fund. Sometimes we are pitched, right, on investing in crypto. That's not something we want to do. If we don't understand it, we don't want to invest in it. And I do think this is an area that needs greater regulation. Now, there's a lot of talk with the new administration. Their approach on many of these issues, not just crypto, will be less regulation. So I am a little concerned, for consumers. Could they be vulnerable to getting talked into investing in crypto or using crypto and being on the losing end? A lot of the wealthy players, in this area, they'll figure out how to navigate that at their own risk. But I hate to see people who perhaps shouldn't be taking these risks get involved in it. So we're looking at it from an investment perspective. We're not ready to jump into it, in terms of pension fund dollars. But I do think the regulatory framework, whether that's federal or state or some combination, we have our Department of Financial Services here at the state level. I do think that the consumer interest should be uppermost in everyone's mind, and very much should make sure that there is some appropriate level of regulation. I don't presume to be an expert as to what that level of regulation should be, but I think if it becomes the Wild West and people thinking they're going to make some quick money, that will be a recipe for disaster.
He is State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. You are listening to The Capital Connection. I'm David Gustina. Thank you for that, Tom. The pension fund, since you mentioned it, let's talk about it for a second. I have a good friend now. He's just gotten in Tier 6. Should we be looking positively toward the future of our pension fund?
Well, we're having a good year so far. We actually had our quarterly results as of September 30th. We are now up to about $274.6 billion for that quarter. We had over a 4% positive return. Keep in mind, as we've talked on your show before, we value the fund, and that's the number that really matters, on March 30th of every year, the end of the state fiscal year. So we still have a ways to go, but I think we're headed to certainly this last quarter of the calendar year, third quarter of our pension fund fiscal year. I think we're going to have another positive return. So that's very good news. For those in Tier 6, like your friend, this year the legislation and the governor agreed to an enhancement on Tier 6. Remember, Tier 6 was put in a few years ago, right after Tier 5, to reduce costs, and the costs were reduced because of a less generous benefit structure. So there was a slight modification this year. I think because we're well funded, our pension plan is, as of last March, was over 93% funded. We're probably even higher than that now. So for a public pension plan to be anywhere in the 90s, you're virtually a fully funded pension plan, and that's a very good thing. So we're able to absorb the additional cost. For your friend, retirement security is something we guarantee, number one, in the state constitution, but even more importantly, we have the money when we're this well funded to make sure that the money will be there when they retire down the road. David, there'll be continued discussion, I'm sure, as we move into next year and the year beyond. More than half of our employees now are in Tier 6. And there's going to be more pressure for there to be additional enhancements. There are issues of recruitment and retention of workers, not only for state government, but also for local governments as well. The trade-off is the obvious one. When you do benefit enhancement, it costs more money. And my role as trustee is to keep a plan well funded. So even this year, not just because of the Tier 6 changes, we did have to raise the contribution rate that we charge to government employers. That has an impact on local budgets, on taxpayers, on staffing levels. So I've always said to my friends on the union side, it's certainly reasonable, especially when we're well funded, if you want to make an argument why we should look at Tier 6 and how to structure it. But don't over ask, because we really have to keep the plan well funded, and I will do whatever I need to do on the contribution side that we charge the government employers to keep it well funded. But we cannot price ourselves out of the public support for defined benefit pensions in New York. So it's a delicate balance. And David, the last thing I'll mention, because I'm sure you also have friends who are retirees from the state pension system. And what are the retirees concerned about? Not Tier 6, because they're already out of the system. They're concerned in this very inflationary time, especially if they've been retired for a number of years, and they have a smaller pension than more recent retirees. They want to see New York's cost of living adjustment, COLA, as we call it, the acronym, to be more generous, because we do have a cost of living adjustment. The seniors listening and retirees, they're familiar with that, with Social Security, but also the pension fund has a COLA, but it's very limited. It's limited to the first $18,000 of your salary. It's capped based on the cost of living, and for some folks who've been retired for a long time, the COLA has not been as helpful as they'd like it to be to deal with the inflation that's been going on. So the retirees would like to see COLA enhancement. Well, that costs money also. So that's the challenge. And what we're going to do, I have no role in the decision on this. It's up to the legislature and the governor on benefit level. But I'm going to say this is what the price tag is. And be mindful of the price tag, because we have to make sure we're making decisions today to keep the plan well funded for the person like your friend who's starting to work this year, not retiring for another 25, 30 years. And we can't just take short-term gains, for people and sacrifice the next generation of what their retirement security needs to be. So that's going to be my caution whenever we look at these questions.
All right, Quinn, you got your answer. Now let's go to some of your.
Tell him not to worry. Tell him not to worry. We're good for now.
Yeah, he's a good kid. Well, listen, let's talk about some of your reports. You do these reports, audits, and all sorts of stuff through the Comptroller's office, and you have one that's looking at broadband availability, access, and affordability. What did you find out?
Well, New York is doing pretty well. We benefited from some of the recent federal programs to promote more opportunities for conductivity, but we're not 100% where we need to be. We still have some communities, more often in the rural areas of the state, where infrastructure is not adequate to provide broadband access. And whether it's upstate, downstate, city, or suburb, we still have too many of our households of less income that have not been able to have internet access. So, New York has made significant progress in this area, but we really want to see everybody have this access to broadband. Look, we learned, right, David, during COVID particularly, you need to be connected, and not just for work reasons, as important as that is, but just for daily existence. So we did that report really to remind our policymakers that we need to do more to expand the options as far as broadband, and maybe some of these federal programs have lapsed, maybe advocating for them to be restarted, because the feds always have more money than we do to support these kinds of initiatives, and certainly for the state to continue to do our part as well. So we'll keep an eye on it. We're seeing progress, but we're not at 100% yet.
Now, this is a troubling report here, and this has to do with critical preschool special education services. You're saying in this report they're not reaching all students who need them.
We know how important it is when you have students with special needs. The earlier you could work with those kids and give them the support they need, the more likely it is they're going to be successful, not only in their school career but in life. And I know this is an important area, and New York is very generous with programs, but we still see some significant gaps, and that's why we did that report. We don't want to see any children fall through the cracks. So our laws on the books are there to provide these kinds of programs and supports. We're not fulfilling all the goals that we have with our laws in that regard. So, many of the parents of children with special needs really felt this report validated some of the criticisms they've had, either of how some of their local districts are functioning or state education department oversight. So we're hoping that that report will see some more positive action to really help some of these kids that have been falling through the cracks. Kids should be getting the services that they need, and in the long run, it's also going to save us money, right? When you do an intervention earlier in life, you really not only do you transform the life, but you avoid future costs to make up for what you didn't do when the child was younger.
Hey, let's transform some lives before the holiday, Tom. You know how we're going to do that? There's a new law that makes it easier for people to get their lost money returned to them from your office. Let's get that money out.
And this one the governor did sign, so we're happy about that. We've always talked about unclaimed funds on your show. And I remind everybody, especially because people are spending money with the holidays, go onto our website. Whatever your search engine is, put on New York State Comptroller and click on unclaimed funds, put your name in, any organization you're a part of, business, nonprofit, church, synagogue, mosque, friends, family, deceased close relatives, maybe an inheritance situation. There are any number of ways you may be separated from your money, and we have accounts valued at about $19 billion now in unclaimed funds. So the way this has worked in the past, as you know, David, is folks come to us, usually through the web or an event that we have staff at, or we find people and we reach out and say, hey, we got some unclaimed funds, apply for it. What this new law will allow us to do starting in 2025 is for any unclaimed fund of $250 or less, and that's like 75% of the claims that we have. Instead of having to go through that step of applying to us or we finding you and asking you to apply, we will, after we do our verification, right? We have to, make sure we're identifying the rightful owner. But we will, instead of sending a letter saying, hey, we got unclaimed funds, apply, we will instead send a check directly. So this cuts out one of those steps. So and this is going to be for new unclaimed funds. So at this point, it doesn't affect anything that's already in the system. If it works well, we might be able to go back as well. But at least for the new claims that may be coming in, many people are going to get a letter from us that will include a check. So this is going to help us move more money out, which I think is a good thing. And I will just mention, since it is holiday time, a lot of people are purchasing gift cards as a holiday gift for Hanukkah or Christmas or whatever. If you get a gift card from a major retailer, register it, because if it's lost, it expires, and and it gets turned over to us as an unclaimed fund. If it's registered, you'll be able to claim it. And a lot of the new money coming in, frankly, is coming from old gift cards that get turned over to us.
Hang on a second, Tom. I'm checking to see if I'm in the system here. Darn it. I don't think I got any money. All right.
Well,
it's
that means
fine.
you're keeping good track of your accounts, but you never know.
Darn right I am.
You know, your late great Uncle Tom may leave you money in a life insurance policy that you're not aware of. You never know.
All right, I'm going to check again as much as possible. He is the Comptroller of the State of New York, Tom DiNapoli. He always makes time to talk about what he's doing and his office is doing. And we really appreciate that here at Public Radio. I can't tell you how much, except to say, please come back again and we'll have some more conversations.
Well, David, I promise I'll be back next year. How does that sound?
Oh, man. We're going to have to wait a whole year? Wow.
Well, a couple of weeks anyway,
All right?
Fine.
Fine.
Happy, healthy New Year to
too.
you and your listeners, and I always enjoy our conversation.
Thank you. Tom DiNapoli on this week's Capital Connection. Support for the Capital Connection comes from New York State United Teachers, working to support students, educators, and public schools as the center of their communities through the Public Schools Unite Us initiative. The Capital Connection is a production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. You can listen to the Capital Connection anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or anywhere you get your podcast. And join us again next week at this same time for another political conversation. For the Capital Connection, I'm David Gustina.